Beverly was the most miserable human being I'd ever met. Friend of a friend, tolerated her for years, and all she ever did was rage. She checked all the boxes and more off your carnal material list of requirements, but nothing and no one was ever good enough. No one and nothing ever made her happy, not even for a moment like material things can do. She'd stomp around screaming, "I got this, I got that," doing the point and stare I've come to know so well. And every year her pile of stuff grew bigger and more expensive, and so did her rage. So I'm at our friend Diane's one time, and we're sitting in the kitchen talking, and we hear the front door. And Beth storms into the kitchen, points at something, and screams, "That's dirty," and spins and leaves the room. Just that fast. And we look at each other and we're laughing. We're dying, trying not to laugh out loud, trying to keep the conversation going like it didn't even happen. And 5 minutes later, we hear the front door slam and a car leave, and we just lost it. I mean, it was her friend in her house, and she didn't go after her because we knew better. You just didn't say anything to Bev if you didn't want a face full of her rage. Everyone I ever met who knew Beverly would just laugh and say, "She's always been like that." Bev says it's her man God's fault. She doesn't have any friends and no one will come to the house. And they just laugh. Bev's on hormones. She's doing better. And they'd all laugh. Now, Beverly was never one to brag on her label. But she calls me one time in her usual funk. And we have to have haircuts. You have to come over this weekend. But we have to do this on Saturday. And we have to do this on Saturday. And we have to do that on Saturday. And you know me, I'm not that smart. I said, "Well, do you want me to come over on Sunday?" And she screams into the phone, "I have to go to church." Yeah, just rage. So maybe I lied. Maybe I did know a church lady. But I never would have worn that necklace, and I never in a million years would have ever considered marriage or ever walked through the doors of a church if I knew you were going to immediately, totally alienate me, recruit an army to destroy every aspect of my life, lie to my face about it the whole time, and turn me into Beverly. You didn't try, you did it. I admit it. Was I supposed to let you marry me off when you couldn't answer one of my baby Christian questions or pretend to tolerate me so you could lock me into a lifetime of being a Beverly? I mean, I haven't thought of this woman in probably 17, 18 years, but she came to mind and stuck there like the big black cloud she was until I felt compelled to make this video. So Diane introduced me to Bev in maybe 92 or 93, and I start cutting their hair. And all Bev does is bitch about her man God, bitch about her job. She's stuck in the same loops every time I go over there. And she calls me one time and invites me to hang out. So I go over there and I barely make it in the door, and she turns me around, takes me across the street into this empty house, into this child's bedroom, points and says, "Fix their computer." No, I don't know whose computer this is. I don't know what's wrong with it. And besides, it's a Mac. So I say, "Bev, it's a Mac." And she screams in my face, "It's a computer." Then she asks me to look at her computer. And it's a second-hand computer, 240 meg hard drive, 2 megs of RAM, and she's screaming it's slow. I said, "Bev, it's working fine. It is what it is." And then she screams, "It's running out of space." Well, I searched and found some paint pics from the kids and some to-do lists of Bev's, and I said, "It's not going to hold much more than your operating system. You need to save your files to disk. There's nothing wrong with it. It is what it is." Well, by the end of the week, she calls me screaming, "The computer crashed. It won't start." Well, what happened? I did what you did, and I went in deleting files. "Well, do you have the installation disks?" And she screams, "No." I'm like, "Well, I can't help you." And she slams the phone down in my face. So the next time, 2 or 3 times I see her, the first thing she does is charge up into my face screaming, "I bought a new computer." Well, there you go. Don't call me to fix it. But I just nod and smile. 420 meg hard drive and 4 megs of RAM. Megabytes, kids. And this was all in the first year or two. So she invites me to go play paintball. Well, yeah, what do I need to wear? What do I need to bring? Oh, you're fine. It's covered. So I get in the car with her and her family, and she rages the whole way there. We get there, and her family scatters like cockroaches, and I'm expected to sit there and listen to her bitch the whole time. Oh, I was mad. And she did it again. She calls me to go take a scuba class. Well, yeah. So I have my suit, my towel, and my water shoes, and I get in the car with her and her family, and she's fuming and bitching the whole way. And we get there, and her family scatters, and she marches over to the bleachers and just starts into the same old loops. Oh, no. Oh, no. I went and signed up for the class. And as I'm at the edge of the pool getting suited up, she is screaming from the other end. I can't believe she's not sitting here with me. I mean, there's 60 or 80 people in this pool, and they all stop talking and stare. Never again. Never again. Bev had absolutely no interests but raging and growing her pile of shit. Her job was another one year after year. All she did was rage. She wasn't dealing with the Carrie. She hated the people. She hated the office. She hated the work. She hated everything about this job. And finally I said, well, Bev, why don't you find another job? And she just screams in my face, I'm gonna retire in 10 years. That was Bev. So it was about 2 years out when her constant loops turned to constant rage. I had asked her one time who her mechanic was, and she was like, Johnny's a mechanic, bring it over, he'll fix it. I'm like, are you sure? Oh, yeah. So he looks at it and he says, oh, yeah, it's not a big deal, I can have it fixed in an hour. I'm like, great, thank you. So I get over there and pull the car in the garage, and I can already hear Bev screaming in the house. And she comes out the door with her brother-in-law in tow, drinks in hand, and she pulls out two stadium chairs, parks them in front of the car, and just rages on her man God the whole time. She is screaming to the whole neighborhood that he's a piece of crap. He doesn't do anything right. He's not worth a shit. She married the wrong brother, just cussing and screaming nonstop the whole time he's fixing my car. And I just stood there horrified and disgusted the whole time. Yep, she never said hello. She never offered me a chair. She never acknowledged my presence. She just threw me a scrap, offered up his services so she'd have me trapped over there for an hour listening to her rage. So I thanked him, and I got in the car, and I left without a word. Never again. Bev would call, I was busy. Bev would call, I'd be unavailable. She quit leaving messages because she knew I wouldn't call her back. I moved a couple times and changed my number, my unlisted number. And she must have called Diane for it because 3 months, 6 months later, I'd pick up the phone and there would be Bev in her usual funk. And Diane would just laugh. That's just Bev. She's been that way since school. Now, I moved one time, and it was Diane and Jim and Dottie and Adam, I think. And I never subscribed to the shopping is therapy theory, and I always fit comfortably in a one-bedroom apartment. I could be out of one place and in the next in 2 or 3 hours easy. I know you can't believe someone would be comfortable and content not chasing the dollar signs and bigger piles of shit, but it is what it is. So we got the furniture in, and here comes Beverly. Not just Bev, but her man God, her brother-in-law, and her two girls. 5 people all pile into the living room of this one-bedroom apartment in the middle of a move. No hello, no offer to help. Never lifted a finger. She just starts screaming to the whole apartment building how she's going to fix me up with her brother-in-law. Diane and Jim run out the door, and I'm shocked and mad. And by the time I open up that apartment door, the last 15 or 20 boxes are piled in the hall, piled in front of the neighbor's door, and they're gone. Now I prop the door open, and I'm trying to clear the boxes from the neighbor's doorway, but there's nowhere to put them because Beverly's got 5 people crammed into this apartment. So I just ignore her until she marches them all out and left. Just a big black cloud bulldozing the entire operation with her agenda, just completely oblivious to the world around her. And I'm cursing Diane again for telling her that I was moving, where I was moving, and when I was moving, and then ditching me there with her. So 6 months or a year later, I see Bev, and do you think she comes up and says, hello, how are you? Nope. She charges up into my face, all snarly and nasty, and screams, he's got a girlfriend. He's moving in with her. And I just nod and smile. I'm thinking, good, go terrorize them. Now, I only had to deal with her a couple of times a year. There is no person, place, or thing could have ever convinced me to make Bev a regular part of my life. You know, after the first year or two, if she'd crap me, I would go over once in a while to keep the peace, because we had common friends, and I would spend 45 minutes or an hour cutting hair and just tune her out. It wasn't the usual loops. I mean, nothing was exempt. She would just scream in a rage the entire time I walked there. Um, One time I got there, 2 seconds before her, I'm walking in the door as she's pulling in the drive. I took 10 steps in the house, said hello to her girls, and she slams the door open and just screams at the top of her lungs about her commute. And I mean, she had a 5 or 10 minute commute, not 3 or 4 stoplights, secondary roads, and it was a good enough reason for her to just scream at the top of her lungs in rage. And she didn't even notice. I'd tune her out, get it done, and leave. And she usually never noticed I didn't even say a word. Now, Johnny would say hello if I came in. The girls would say hello if Bev wasn't in the room. If they already weren't hiding in their rooms because she was already raging. But this woman only had two speeds. She had rage and trying to suck it in. And about 2 years in, her suck it in button broke. Now, occasionally she would notice that I had tuned her out and not said a word the whole time I was there. And as I was packing up, she'd get all bug-eyed and drag me around the house pointing at her stuff. I got this. I got that. The point and stare I've come to know so well. And I just nod and smile. The one time she took me into her bedroom, opened her closet door, and just stared at me. Walk-in closet, packed so tight you couldn't move anything to see what was in there. And she just opened the door and stared. I mean, was I supposed to be impressed? She was the most miserable creature I'd ever known. So I go to Diane's grandfather's funeral, and everyone's talking about him and gathered around in groups. I mean, this guy was a riot. And there's Bev. She's just ready to blow. She's stomping around, slamming stuff around on this table, trying to look busy. She's fuming. And there's an invisible circle around her, a 15 or 20-foot circle that no one will step through. And this goes on the whole time until she goes over to a chair and picks up her bag and grabs her man god and marches her family out the door. I mean, she could barely contain her rage for an hour for a funeral. And that was Bev. They all knew her. They all tolerated her. And I did a couple of times a year to keep the peace. So finally she quit calling for a couple of years. And I remember someone saying, oh, Bev's on hormones. She's doing better. And of course they all laughed. I should have known. But she calls after a couple years and she's acting all human. Hello, how are you? Gosh, I haven't seen you in so long. You know, Johnny could really use a haircut. Why don't you come by? You know me, I'm not that smart. Okay. So I get there 2 minutes before her, and Johnny says, hello, would you like something to drink? The girls are all giggly and smiles like little girls can be. And, I mean, we didn't hear the car or the front door. Just immediately from the front of the house, we heard, wow! I mean, she's just screaming. And Johnny ducks and runs to the far end of the couch and sits there hunched over in a fetal position. And the girls run to their bedrooms, but Bev meets them in the doorway, and she just starts screaming at the top of her lungs, fucking bitches! Fucking bitches! Fucking bitches! And she's stomping around, all bug-eyed and wild, just screaming obscenities. And I'm in shock. I mean, my jaw's on the floor. I could have never imagined in a million years Bev being any worse than she already was. So she brings it down a notch. She barely gets herself under control, and she's hyperventilating, and she's bug-eyed, and she starts screaming, I got a new addition. I got a new kitchen. I got a garden tub. I got a new SUV. Huffing and puffing, hyperventilating. I'm going to put in a patio. I'm getting a hot tub. Huffing and puffing, just bug-eyed and crazily darting around. I'm in shock. So she brings it down another notch and orders Johnny to go wet down his hair. And she gets real quiet. He sits in that chair and I start cutting. And as soon as I get started, she sits 3 feet in front of us and just screams in rage the whole time. Just screaming and cussing. I mean, just screaming at the top of her voice. She's not even saying anything. And that was the fastest, worst haircut I ever did. I mean, 2 or 3 minutes and I walked out the door. Fuck this. Never again. I mean, I could have never imagined her going from a raging lunatic to a complete and total monster. In hindsight, she quit calling me when I got married. I think she was mad that I didn't invite her to the wedding. Would you? No, I'm not telling you not to. I wasn't trained up proper to stomp around squealing, I don't like her, I don't like her, don't talk to her. Go do it. But I would have never considered having Bev stomping around, throwing fits, and raging in people's faces. We weren't friends. In 10 years, I never called her, not to chat, not to hang out, not to do anything. And she never pretended to want to have me over there for any other reason but to listen to her rage. Even when she tried to pretend and would say, hello, how are you, or ask me about myself, all it took was a 3 or 4 word answer, and she just went off on a tangent. I was just there to listen to her rage. And to prove my point, to prove my theory, I never heard from her again. And I always felt so bad for her girls. I never knew anything about them. Bev always treated them like a nuisance, like they were just 2 more objects that she had to deal with. They'd come into the room and hang around the perimeter and not make any eye contact until Bev acknowledged them, and then they'd act all whiny and apologetic and dance around whatever question they wanted to ask, trying to gauge her temper. That was Bev. Now Scott's gone, and I run into Johnny at a gas station, and I had never seen him before without her. And I'm talking to him, and this is the most he has ever said in 10 years combined. He tells me she's kicked him out, and he's sleeping in his truck at work. He has friends that'll take him in on occasion, but he's basically homeless. And I'm like, well, why don't you get a furnished efficiency until you figure out what you're going to do? He's like, oh, no, he has no money. Bev still gets his paychecks. And he'll never leave her. He's going to be responsible and pay for all those big-ticket items she racked up before she kicked him out. And he's working 60, 80 hours a week to do it. It was like he had Stockholm Syndrome. He had spent his entire adult life being her personal whipping post. And she kicked him out, and he still couldn't go. I didn't have any room to talk. I had never considered marriage before Scott, and he was a con artist. But I felt bad for him. He'd spent his whole adult life being her personal punching bag, and I told him, I said, I don't have anything. Scott's destroyed the house and most everything in it, but there's no good reason for you to be sleeping in your truck if you don't want to. There's a couch in the basement, there's a shower down there, do your laundry, I don't care. I made it clear I wasn't looking for a roommate. I was trying to work 2 jobs again myself. And I gave him a key to the side door. Maybe 5 times the first couple weeks, the dogs heard him come in real late, and he went down the basement and slept on that couch. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I realized he had just gone. He just disappeared. Never heard from him again. Oh, and about 2 or 3 months later, I found the garage open and his ladder and stuff was gone. That was just Johnny. He was just a product of Bev's creation. He'd spent his whole adult life trying not to be seen or heard. Now, a few years after Diane introduced me to Bev, her sister moved to the neighborhood. And Diane's like, you two should be friends. Well, she had never talked about her sister. I didn't really know anything about her, and the three of us never hung out. Well, sue me, hate me, I don't care. But if Beverly was Diane's idea of a friend, I wasn't even willing to try. Now, the only other person I ever knew who compared to Bev was Vicky's friend Lisa. She lived in Columbus. I only saw her 3 or 4 times maybe in 13 years, and I could not say a non-judgmental, non-opinionated statement without this woman just screeching in my face. She was just a little Bev Jr. Now, after I married Scott, I called Vicky a couple times in tears. I got home, it's pouring rain, the doors are propped open, the house is full of bugs, the dogs tracked mud all through the house and furniture, another kitchen chair's broken, he's passed out on the couch. She'd just laugh and say, I pretend I don't understand and make Dave take care of it all. Or the house reeks, and I found a case of empty beer cans hidden in the back of the closet. I've barely paid the mortgage and the accounts are empty. And she'd just laugh and say, I pretend I don't understand and make Dave take care of it all. Now that's why people made fun of her. It wasn't for her looks. It was because she would act dumb and play stupid to get people to do her job or do stuff for her or give her stuff. And she would brag about it. She was proud about it. So I quit calling her for a couple of years. And out of nowhere, Vicky calls and says, let's go to the movies. And I'm like, okay, great. I could use a night off. Now, this was totally uncharacteristic of her. I should have known something was up. Because Vicky was my bar friend, okay? In 13 years, Vicky was always the one to call and say, let's go to the bar. And yeah, 9 times out of 10, I would say, okay, I'm admitting my sins. But unless it had to do with her kids or spending money at one of her parties, all she ever wanted to do was go to the bar or go shopping. So I showed up at her house, and Lisa's there. And I'm thinking, oh, no, 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 no. And they're talking about how to get to the movie theater, and I'm like, follow me, I'll get you there. Now, the whole way I'm thinking, I just can't do it. I know we won't even be able to pick a movie without this little witch screeching in my face. The only thing I could imagine worse than dealing with Scott would be dealing with Beverly or Lisa. So I got him there, I pulled in, I didn't stop, I didn't slow down, I just pulled out the next exit and left. You know what my perception is of Lisa now, don't you? Now I know you were there, and I'll say it again. I won't surround myself with shitty people in order to have people. I'm not talking about the generally happy, perfectly imperfect people I've known my whole life. I'm talking about the Beverlys, the Lisas, and the Squeakies, and the nonstop attacks that I've had ever since the morning I was introduced to Squeaky's mommy as a baby Christian at Church on the Rise 16 years ago. I never needed a Bible to tell me that there are no perfect people in the world, and that it's a totally unrealistic expectation or goal. I just didn't know it would be the default excuse for all of this.